This is the RTX 4070, Nvidia's newest graphics card with a target MSRP of $600. Now, whether or not there will actually be any 4070s going for that price when they hit the shelves on launch day, I have no idea. We're gonna have to wait and see. But that's the price we've been told, at least for more entry-level models like this one. This is the PNY Verto. The launch of the 4070 is pretty exciting because it marks the next most affordable option for current gen graphics cards. Prior to this, Nvidia's cheapest 4000 series offering is the RTX 4070 Ti, which launched at $800, and AMD's cheapest offering is the RX 7900 XT, which launched at $900. So yeah, pretty slim pickings when it comes to affordable current generation cards right now, but they are slowly trickling out. We have this one right here, and I'm sure AMD will soon have a response to this. If we're being real here, $600 is by no means cheap. However, it is a substantial difference in price compared to the two previously mentioned cards. Hopefully by the end of this video, you can make a more informed decision if you're currently in the market to buy a graphics card right now, whether it be for your first ever gaming PC, or if it's to upgrade from something older because you're looking for more performance. Speaking of upgrading from something older, that brings us to our sponsor spot for this video, Jawa. Jawa is a user-driven marketplace created for gamers and enthusiasts to buy and sell amongst each other, organized by a wide range of product categories covering all your PC gaming needs. From individual components like processors, motherboards, and graphics cards, to laptops, peripherals, consoles, and even complete custom-built PCs, you'll find everything you need on Jawa with their user-friendly interface and filtering system. Getting back to that point about your next graphics card upgrade though, Jawa recently launched their GPU buying program where they'll buy your old GPU directly, hassle-free. No need to wait for a buyer, no taking pictures, managing a listing, none of that. Just fill out a quick survey and they'll instantly give you a quote on the spot. Jawa still encourages sellers to create and manage their own listings if they're chasing that maximum profit potential, but the graphics card buying program is a nice option for those individuals out there who are looking to offload their hardware as quickly and pain-free as possible. You can offset the cost of your next upgrade by selling your card today on Jawa using either method. Check out the link in the description and pinned comment below. And alright, let's get back to the video. So a little bit more information about this particular card here. Like I said earlier, this is a very entry-level model from PNY in their Verto lineup. Size-wise, this is a very reasonably sized card. I feel like everything from the current generation has been like 3 fans, massively over-designed coolers, so to see a 4070 that is pretty normal size is a breath of fresh air. Like for comparison, here is a Founders Edition RTX 2060, very standard sized card from a few years ago. Ooh, almost dropped that there. And putting it next to this Verto 4070, it's nearly the same size. Like you can see it completely covering it there. The length is the biggest difference. Like, yeah, the 4070 is maybe 1 centimeter longer, but when you're looking at like the height and the thickness, it's very similar, making it a very compact card. And I'm actually pretty glad that I got an entry-level model to review because this represents like the baseline 4070 performance, and it should be very representative of what you'll get at around that $600 MSRP. I've never been a fan of spending a premium on nicer version of cards. Like some variants out there are already halfway to the cost of the next card. Yes, I'm looking at you, Asus Strix, as one of the worst culprits of this. You'll see later on in the video that this card performs well with this cooler. Temps under load were in the mid to high 60s with the fans running on the stock curve, which had it mostly operating around 60% fan speed or about 1700 RPM. This isn't a power-hungry card at all. It's got a target TGP of 200 watts, which, speaking of power, this model and other entry-level models like it will only require a single 8-pin connector. Supposedly, there's going to be some more premium models that's going to utilize the newer PCIe 5.0 power connectors, kind of like the 4070 Ti, but not this one. We've still got the old connectors here. Now, for the testing later on, I did use complete stock settings out of the box, so no manual overclocks greater than whatever this is factory tuned to. I did, however, take a look at the overclocking capabilities just because I was curious, and I used PNY's Velocity X software, which operates very similarly to Afterburner in terms of convenient sliders to quickly apply an overclock, as well as the ability to monitor crucial stats like temps and such. I was easily able to push the card an additional 200 MHz on the core and memory, and that's before touching any voltage or power limits, and it ran stable. So while this card is on the more entry-level side of things, it can still be pushed a little further. Now, to test this, I put it head-to-head with other cards that are in direct competition with it in that $600-ish price range. On AMD side, we have to go back to the last generation's RX 6900 XT or RX 6950 XT. While those did launch at $1,000 or more, they can now consistently be found at around $650, making them direct competition. On Nvidia's side, I think the most comparable card from last gen is the RTX 3080. Somehow it has not moved in price at all. These are still $700 new, even 2.5 years after launch. And that's the 10GB version too. If you want a 12GB card, you're paying even more. If you look in the used market, however, on sites like eBay, you can find 3080s for a little over $500. That's a much better price, but then again, it's a used card, so it's not as apples to apples when comparing against a brand new release. Either way you look at it though, from the previous generation, the 3080 is the most likely competitor against the 4070. And because I had one available to test, I also added in the RTX 4070 Ti to my benchmarks. It's a completely different price tier, coming in at around $800. But since the two cards are right next to each other in the product stack, I thought it would be worth showing. Here's a quick side-by-side of all the cards I tested and some of their important specs. Feel free to pause the screen if you want to look closer at them, but do note the pretty big difference in each card's TGP, with the 4070 coming in at the lowest, and this is all going to be reflected on the overlay that's shown during the benchmarks. For my test bench, I used a Ryzen 5800X3D paired with 32GB of Team Group Extreme DDR4 memory at 4000 CL18, which should be plenty capable of handling all these cards. I tested at 1440p because I think that's definitely the target resolution for the best gaming experience with all of these cards. High refresh rate, 1440p is where it's at. I looked at some results at 4K, and it's pretty evident that some of these cards without any upscaling, like DLSS or FSR involved, kind of struggle to give a consistent 60 FPS experience. The focus of this video is the RTX 4070 after all, and based on some of the numbers that I was seeing at 4K, it is definitely better suited for 1440p. At that resolution, it also gives us a little bit higher FPS, so there's more fidelity when it comes to like calculating percentage differences based off average FPS and things like that. But yeah, let's take a look at the numbers. We'll start off with some synthetic benchmarks that hopefully everyone is familiar with and can even run at home to compare. In Fireshark Extreme, a 1440p DX11 test scenario, we're going to focus on the graphics score, and we see the 4070 pretty even with the 3080, just slightly edging it out. The 6900 XT takes a pretty big lead with over 40% better performance, and the 4070 Ti comes in with a score 25% higher than 4070. And this is how I'm going to be formatting the results as we talk through them, by the way. All the percent differences will be in relation to the 4070. In TimeSpy, a 1440p DX12 test, we again see the 4070 and 3080 pretty even with one another. The 6900 XT doesn't have as big of a lead this time, scoring similar to the 4070 Ti, both roughly 25% faster than the 4070. In Unigine Superposition, a test that's very demanding on the graphics card, I tested at 1440p using settings based on the extreme presets. Here, the 4070 comes in last place, even losing to the 3080 by a decent amount. But not to worry though, it is just a synthetic test after all. Now we're going to move on to the games. We'll go in alphabetical order, so that starts us off with Apex Legends. Here, the 4070 performs almost identical to the RTX 3080. The 6900 XT, which is not that much more expensive, has a huge lead by almost 30%, and the 4070 Ti, being the most expensive card by quite a bit, disappoints a little due to trailing behind the 6900 XT at all. In Assassin's Creed Valhalla, we see the 4070 pulling ahead of the 3080, which is pretty impressive considering the huge difference in power consumption between the two cards. The 6900 XT takes the lead here once again by a decent margin. In Borderlands 3, the trend doesn't change that much. The 4070 and the 3080 battle it out, this time with the 3080 slightly edging out the 4070, and the 6900 XT continue its dominance, even over the much more expensive RTX 4070 Ti once again. In Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, the pendulum swings back over to the 4070 in its head-to-head battle against the 3080. The 6900 XT continues to lead the charge, followed by the 4070 Ti in second place. Now, if those frame rates aren't high enough in a fast-paced shooter for you, then upscaling is an option that you can enable to give you some higher numbers. With DLSS and FSR enabled at quality setting for the respective cards, we do see all the performance numbers get a pretty nice uplift well into the high refresh rate territory. And here the 4070 pulls further away from the 3080, and it actually slightly closes the gap between it and the 4070 Ti. As we continue through the benchmarks, we see this back and forth ongoing battle between the 4070 and 3080, and it doesn't stop at Cyberpunk. Here the 3080 takes the lead back by about 10%. Unsurprisingly, the 6900 XT again gets the win. I also tested this with upscaling enabled, so again DLSS for Nvidia and FSR 2.1 for AMD, set to quality. We do get uplifts across the board, with the percent differences almost identical between all of the cards to when DLSS and FSR were disabled. Now, Cyberpunk does have DLSS 3 frame generation, which is one of the selling points of the RTX 4000 series cards. Frame generation is not available to AMD cards, nor is it available to RTX 3000 series. With frame generation turned on, both 4000 series cards completely blow by the 3080 and 6900 XT, which are left with only DLSS 2 and FSR respectively. The last Cyberpunk test I wanted to do was looking at pure ray tracing performance, with no resolution scaling crutches or frame generation or anything like that. And here is where the RX 6900 XT really struggles. While it dominates in rasterization performance in almost all the titles, it comes in dead last in ray tracing performance. The other three cards though are pretty on trend with what we've been seeing up to this point with regards to performance differences. Alright, enough with Cyberpunk. There's just way too many different ways that game can be tested. So now on to Far Cry 6. Here we see a pretty narrow spread between all the cards, again with the 4070 and 3080 within arm's reach of each other, and the 4070 Ti with a slight edge over the 6900 XT. Over in Fortnite, the spread is much narrower, with the 4070, 3080, and 6900 XT all performing very close to one another, and the 4070 Ti taking the victory here. This was at epic settings with Nanite disabled. Now running that back and testing with Nanite enabled, the FPS takes a pretty big drop with a similar spread in results between all the cards, with the exception of the 6900 XT, which makes a better showing here, being right on the tail of the 4070 Ti. The trend goes back to normal in Forza Horizon 5, with the 4070 beating out the 3080, not by any crazy amount, they're still within 10% of each other. The 6900 XT takes the W here, and the 4070 Ti isn't proving to be much of value here, with only a 15% lead over the 4070, despite, again, costing 33% more. In Halo Infinite, the 4070 beats the 3080 in their ongoing battle by around 10% or so, but it also gets beaten by the 6900 XT at around 10% as well. And here the 4070 Ti wins with the best performance, as a card that costs the most is expected to do. Next is Hogwarts Legacy, and the pendulum shifts back in favor of the RTX 3080 here, which beats the 4070 by 11%. The 6900 XT, with its own ongoing battle against the 4070 Ti, does take the win here. Rainbow Six Siege is always fun to test if you want to see really high numbers, and here all cards get averages high enough that you could probably argue it doesn't really make much of a difference how much one card beats the other by. They all average over 300 FPS with 1% lows above 200, and the 6900 XT just completely dominates, averaging 400 FPS. And last but not least, Spider-Man Miles Morales. Here, the 4070 gets its final victory over the 3080 and is almost on par with the 6900 XT. This title, from what I've seen from other results online, definitely favors Nvidia graphics cards, and it clearly shows here. The RTX 4070 Ti has a decent lead over the 4070 here, but as with most of the results that we've been seeing, it's not hitting that 33% performance increase to make it linear with the 33% price increase. And one final look at ray tracing performance, we see a similar trend to what we saw in Cyberpunk. 4070 and 3080 are neck and neck with each other, 4070 Ti is a clear winner, and of course the 6900 XT is the worst performer. The message is pretty clear here. If you care about ray tracing at all and plan to use it, do not get an AMD card, especially at this price range right now. So those were the gaming benchmarks, but I did test some non-gaming applications as well for those of you who may be interested, so I'll really quickly go through them right now. Here we've got Blender, which AMD has never really been competitive against Nvidia in. All three Nvidia cards beat out the 6900 XT, with the 4070 Ti leading, followed by the 4070, then the 3080. In the Puget benchmark for Adobe Photoshop, all four cards score within a few percent of each other with regards to the graphics score, so it really doesn't matter what you go with here. In Adobe Premiere Pro, however, there's a bit more of a spread when it comes to the two different brands, with the AMD card scoring the lowest by a noticeable amount, and all three Nvidia cards are within a few percent of each other. So yeah, things like Blender and Premiere Pro, if those are a part of your workflow on top of gaming, then Nvidia is kind of going to be the clear choice. That was just a bunch of results that we just went over, and to be honest, my head kind of hurts after all of that. But I think there are some clear takeaways from it, right? First off, the 4070 trades blows with the last gen's 3080 in almost every test. Like, they were within 10% or so performance of each other, with either card leading depending on the title, though for the games that I tested, the 4070 did win more times than not. The power consumption though is something that cannot be ignored. The 3080 was operating over 300 watts across almost all the tests, and the 4070 was pretty much always under 200 watts. Taking all things into consideration, there's really no reason to buy a 3080 once the 4070 is released. The 3080 lacks newer tech like DLSS 3 frame generation and the ability to AB1 encode, and kind of the most important of all, the price. The 4070 will be cheaper than the 3080 unless we see like a price drop across the board due to this release. But even then, let's say if the 3080 is $600, I still don't think it's worth it when the 4070 is superior in pretty much every other way. You would have to get much lower in price to make it like a more compelling story, and I just don't see that happening, at least for new cards anyways. Maybe used 3080s will get even cheaper due to this releasing, and at that point it could be worth giving up the benefits of a 4000 series card, but that's going to depend on the individual. Now regarding the 6900 XT, as you saw, AMD provides a ton of value when you're looking at just pure rasterization performance. I mean, the 6900 XT won in the majority of the games tested. For the price at around $650 as of recording this, it is very attractive. But if you care about ray tracing performance at all, if you care about DLSS 3 frame generation, Blender performance, Premiere Pro, power consumption, the 6900 XT was hitting near 290 watts for all those games. If you care about all those things, or some of those things, then you kind of got to balance out what's more important to you. And for the 4070 Ti, there was not a single instance from my testing where it performed 33% better than the 4070. But that's the price increase you'd have to pay to get it. I was seeing anywhere between 15 to 25% gains, and while it's not as good of a value proposition, like FPS per dollar wise, that just comes with the territory in PC hardware, right? You kind of start to hit diminishing returns the higher end you go. But yeah, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this video. Let me know your thoughts overall on the RTX 4070 down below in the comments. But now you've probably watched multiple reviews of this card on embargo day or sometime after embargo day, and you might already have formed your opinion on it, so I'd love to hear those. Also, since I love to ask hypothetical questions, here is the hypothetical for this video. Now let's assume that the release of the 4070 drives down the price of the 3080s and the 6900 XTs and 6950 XTs to $600. So they're all the same price across the board. If you were in the market to buy a new graphics card and had $600 to spend, which card are you going for? The 4070, the 3080, or the 6900/6950 XT, and why? I kind of have a feeling what I think a majority of the people out there will pick, but you never know. Sometimes people have surprising answers. Whatever it may be though, let me know down in the comments below. I'm really curious to hear your responses. But yeah, that'll be it for me though. I want to thank you all as always for watching and for continuing to support the channel. Thanks to the channel members as always for their above and beyond support. Be safe out there, and I will see you all down in the comments as well as the next stream and or video. Bye.